I'm talking to Dick Spottswood on May 9, 2000.
For him, because it put him in touch with a lot of older music that he might not have come across in other ways, and he's not had a deep and abiding interest in that, but it's always been sort of ongoing.
Right. He does a song on one record. He says he learned off a Dave Van Ronk record, and I don't know that he was doing that at an earlier time.
Yeah, he would have done that at an earlier time. He was he grew up in the '60s, and he liked Bob Dylan and all those people. I mean, his tastes are fairly broad, but he discovered he could sing in a style that was convincing to country music people, and I don't know what it is. Around Washington, we've always had people that could sing country fairly well, even if they were from the Bethesda suburbs. There's something in the smog we breathe. I don't know what it is, but John Duffy certainly never sounded like a hillbilly.
Right.
But he was universally accepted as a wonderful singer, and Dudley as well. It's too bad that Dudley, joined the Seldom Scene just when Duffy was getting ready to check out. That would have been an interesting collaboration if it had been allowed to mature.
Continue. Yeah. Well, I don't live there now, but I spent almost 20 years in California before going to Texas, and there was a really vibrant bluegrass scene there, as I'm sure you know. Obviously, not people from the hills, but
no, and it was bluegrass without being country,
right.
Which is something I've never cared for about California music.
Yeah.
I think that in Washington we managed to keep the country element a lot more, alive.
That's an interesting point.
Gospel songs are a much greater part of the repertoire here, so that some of the values that went into the creation of bluegrass have been maintained. It's not simply something for Peter Rowan, I guess, is one of those California people that managed to rise above that standard to some extent, but an awful lot of other people are more of the Jerry Garcia.
Well, that's a real interesting. I was thinking that as you were saying, because that's my first. I went there right after college, and I didn't listen to bluegrass in college. Bluegrass was not even on the radar screen.
Yeah, we knew about it.
I was from New York, and from New York, went to college. Bluegrass was not even there, and in California. I'm really intrigued by what you said. It's the first time it's occurred to me, because I went to Paul's Saloon. I lived right near it. Discovered the Laurie Lewis crowd, and it was a hippie thing. It was an Earth Mama, back to the roots,
sure,
hippie thing. It was granola and Birkenstocks and that whole shtick. It was not country, and I don't even know that I knew that until.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the ways that bluegrass has evolved. It is, since the 1960s, really, it's been possible to play bluegrass without being country.
Right.
But you can't play country without being country.
Yeah.
Even though country keeps, accruing pop music.
Well, now you can, but I think it's not what
you sort of can now. I mean,
hell,
I
Shania
guess,
Twain is the biggest.
Yeah, and she's, Shania Twain just simply, chose country from among a number of options.
Right.
Whereas, Eddie Arnold didn't choose country because,
right.
That was, he was immersed in it. He had no alternative. Bill Monroe.
And I think there's also a question of whether people who are seen as not quite as plastic would have been billed country in another phase of their careers. 25 years ago, Mary Chapin Carpenter would have just been another folky, an educated.
Well,
folky.
25 years ago she was.
Right, I guess.
She was in a She was in an Irish band here called the Hags, if I'm not mistaken.
See, I didn't know her then again, because she's
Yeah.
from this area, and I
Yeah.
was elsewhere.
Yeah.
I didn't know her until
She was just, one of the crowd until, she discovered that, she had a special talent to lift her up and out of the proceedings, and I hear her sing, and, well, I think her, her songs are beautifully conceptualized. She sings them intelligently, but, to me, it's only country because somebody says it is.
Exactly.
If I'd heard it, I would have never put that designation on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When I go to the matter, how did you, as I said to you on the phone, I guess, I'm writing in part about Rounder Records. I mean, I'm writing more broadly about what's going on right now with that, what I always call the ever-going and ongoing debate about tradition and commerce. And there's a lot going on right now. There's people, you might have stepped out of it, I don't know, one way or the other.
Oh, that's a fascinating debate.
And it's still going on, and it's going on in the Folk Alliance, which I had hooked up to a few years ago through a friend of mine who's now an agent in Nashville. He said to me, why don't you come along on this thing with me, because you have these interests. And I've been to academic conferences, and I didn't know what to expect. I just said, sure. I had a free weekend, and we said I was his roadie. That was my...
You were who's ready?
My friend is an agent.
Oh, okay.
But since I had no particular purpose in being at this Folk Alliance industry trade show, as a joke, he used to introduce me to people as a
So
roadie.
it's not a matter of you would have been excluded or anything.
No, it was just, I knew it's a trade show.
I
basically.
can't
I
imagine
have-
people, breaking down the doors to get in somehow.
Oh, it's packed.
Is it really?
My God, the Folk Alliance conference in Cleveland in February had, Phyllis was just telling me this yesterday, she's the executive director. I think it had just shy of 1,900 registrants, which blows most academic conferences out of the water. And on site, probably closer to 2,300 or so. They filled 3 hotels in downtown Cleveland and used the convention center for all their seminars and what have you. And it's massive jamming sessions and informal showcases in hotel rooms until 3 in the morning. It puts the IBMA to shame in terms of sheer numbers because it draws from a broader universe. Some bluegrass people go there, but old-timey klezmer, blah 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 blah. Everybody who wants a piece of,
Well, everyone, I guess, who's not tied to the bluegrass world and wants some sort of institutional affiliation. I guess there are a lot more people like that out there. I mean, to me, I imagine that universe is sort of dominated by singer-songwriters who call themselves folk musicians because they don't have another word for what they do.
well, it is, and that's
But if they sing folk music, what was that stuff that John and Alan recorded in the Texas prisons? I mean,
well, absolutely, and there's a huge battle that goes on within the organization about the domination of singer-songwriters.
Yeah.
This is an overt, explicit, lines drawn type thing, and it goes back and forth, and the traditionalists always somehow seem to have the moral upper hand. The singer-songwriters, who are greater in number, shrink against. Why? Because most of them just want to be stars. They want to get record contracts and be stars, and that's harder to defend in an
and they want to
intellectual
be able to
debate.
create within that genre, which I think is perfectly legitimate. The best of them, like Chapin Carpenter, really do manage to rise above the fray and to have some startling things to contribute. And people over the years, like Phil Oakes and Pete Seeger's not a songwriter, I guess. Really have had. I mean, I don't like the music, God knows, but I would also be the last to deny that the impact that it's had.
Right.
Rallying cries for the left, and the left, political left, always seems like an endangered species, and so
Right.
I think you have to learn to like or not like the music on its own merits, but entirely aside from that, I think one has to defend its legitimacy. I think you just have to find another word for it. And singer-songwriters hate to be called singer-songwriters. So what? What will you put in their place?
Well, they hate to be called it.
Uncle Dave Macon was a singer-songwriter. I mean, what's wrong with
That's
it?
the thing. You see, in one of the sessions at Focal Lines, which was it was called the Traditionalists Peer Group, and it was one of a continuing series of outbursts against the domination of singer-songwriters in the organization. So it was designed to say, okay, what can we do to make ourselves more prominent? Jody Stecker stood up and he said, "What's wrong with singer-songwriters?" And everybody was stunned because of who was saying it, but Jody's point was exactly what you made. He says, all this is about is that there's some songwriters, some songs you don't like, and some songs you do. And you don't like a certain, kind of polished, educated, northeastern, 1960s folky sound. But I write songs, I'm a singer-songwriter.
Did he identify that sound in those words?
He did it to me afterwards.
That's interesting.
He did it. He didn't do it in the meeting. His comment in the meeting was pretty much attributed to this, "What's wrong with singer-songwriters?" which got everybody going. Later on, I was talking to him. I know him from California, and that's what he said. I mean, Johnny's from Brooklyn, the Bronx. He knows exactly what that sound is. Yeah,
I'm sure he's.
So.
I mean, Jody's another one who just picked something off the menu.
Right.
But
well, I think he did it with less self-consciousness than a Shania Twain.
Yeah.
I think
his best work has been really superb.
Yeah.
And it has, in a sense, been along the lines of John Duffy, someone singing and creating in a country music fashion without once trying to pretend that he was born in a log cabin,
Right.
or picked cotton as a child or something. But it's the universe has expanded now to allow that. You couldn't have done that in the 50s. A few eyebrows were raised when Peter Rowan first appeared with Bill Monroe. But my gosh, this Harvard kid and Monroe sang so well together that you couldn't deny the basic artistic integrity. And so any arguments that might have been brewing really were stillborn.
A lot of these debates persist, particularly as even the South is becoming more industrialized, as regionalism is, fighting for its life everywhere against
You can't
Starbucks.
even pretend that Fiddlin' John Carson and Uncle Dave Macon were not part of a slowly evolving industrialization of American traditional music. Sure they were, because they went from, both of them, I guess, were born around the same time, Carson in 68 and Macon in 1870. And in the later years of their lives, their traditional music making was perceived as a commercial commodity. It was amenable to early radio. It was amenable to the early phonograph companies. And so what they had been doing for tips or for pleasure or for reasons completely unrelated to the profit motive all their lives, all of a sudden became, is there such a word, commodifiable?
Right, I understand.
And that's the beginning, and the rest of it has been evolving ever since. It's not as though the creativity need has ever disappeared. And to come back to my favorite example, there are some remarkable examples of people like Duffy, who, as you gather, I just can't say enough good about him, because the the more I think about Duffy's place in history, the more the more interesting he appears. He never once put his name out as the head of the band. When Duffy graduated from the band sooner, it wasn't right away, but it became known as Charlie Waller and the Country Gentlemen,
Right.
because Waller was the natural leader, but Duffy just naturally kept the band as a co-op outfit. Even the Seldom Seen, which didn't have Duffy's name on it either, worked as a co-op band. The bass player made the same amount of money as the lead singer, and it's one reason they kept that cohesion. And Duffy, who had day jobs throughout a good bit of that time, never saw himself as trying to advance himself in show business or anything. And I don't know that he saw a lot of the things that he was doing artistically, the particular way he sang, the way he chose and arranged material for the Gentleman and the Seldom Seen, as being part of a greater aesthetic. But that's how it turned out, isn't it?
Right.
And Duffy, who certainly never got even remotely rich from it, probably influenced the development of bluegrass music more than any other one person besides Bill Monroe. And certainly since Bill Monroe. If Bill Monroe did little new after the 1950s, it was as though symbolically the torch was handed to Duffy, because the new stuff came from him.
And how would you characterize
And Duffy was always willing and able to reach into the pop music grab bag and pull out a Bob Dylan song,
Right.
It's All Over Now, Baby Blue, to pull out an Eric Clapton song, Lay Down, Sally. I don't think he ever got quite as far as Tupac Shakur. but Duffy was open to things, and he had an instinct as to what would likely work and what wouldn't. I mean, I don't think all of those attempts were uniformly successful. But hey, if this one didn't work, that one sure did. And he pulled stuff out of the folk revival, whereas most of the people around him were thumbing their noses at the folk revival. But Duffy, saw something of value there and brought it to. But when he did, he didn't take bluegrass to that other genre. He brought the other genre to bluegrass and recreated it in terms of his own particular aesthetic. Pop music has always been a part of country, and I think Dave Macon in the 20s was recording minstrel tunes of the 1880s and 1890s, not even folk songs. I mean, those are things composed, performed on the minstrel stage.
Right.
They'd been around long enough that they passed for folk songs. A.P. Carter did the same thing with the old piano bench sentimental songs and gospel songs and the stamps and so on. So if their music contained elements of pop music a generation before, what's wrong with people like Shania Twain and Garth Brooks, playing music today that sounds like pop music of a generation before this? I mean, there's some continuity there.
There is. I guess some would say, and I just tossed this out, I don't know, you made a point that Duffy didn't take bluegrass to his newer sources. He took his newer sources to bluegrass. I don't know if that's what Garth and Shania are doing with country. I'm not sure that they're, I don't know. It's a line that's nebulous and hard to see. Some would say they're just turning it into pop music with...
I don't know, for a more important reason, and this, And I say this in the interest of full disclosure, I have never actually heard either one of them.
Okay.
But I know what they represent.
Sure.
So,
They sound, it's hard to tell that they're, it's what you said with Mary Chapin Carpenter, certainly Shania Twain, I don't know. It's hard, if you heard it cold on pop radio, I don't know that anyone, you or a casual listener who knows nothing about country music except a vague perception, I don't think anyone would say that's a country song. It's only a country song because of the chart it's on and the industry machinery that produces it, vis-a-vis
Yeah.
promotion man and agents and what have you.
well, that's part of the industrialization process. You know, the beginning with Macon and Carter performing those old songs, mostly anonymously for early phonograph records or on broadcast. The next step, I guess, is when Acuff Rose is created in '41, and all of a sudden, those old songs that either were nobody copyrighted because a copyright was not seen as an income producer, or the songs were so old they were out of copyright, or they were so obsolete that even if they were technically covered by copyright, nobody went after the infringers. So that during the first 20 odd years or so of country music recordings, ownership of songs was not an important part of the mix, with a few exceptions, like Prisoner's Song, where everybody went to court because the pockets all of a sudden grew very, very deep, and ownership and origins of that song became important because so much money was at stake. That's almost the exception that proves the rule. Nobody came along and did that for a Wabash Cannonball, and they well might have. But Acuff Rose, combining, Roy's income and Fred Rose's Tin Pan Alley pop music smarts, all of a sudden creates a new entity that guards, copyrights, protects, licenses, and so on songs, and of course it proved to be one of the biggest money makers in Nashville. I imagine it still is. That's a catalog that hasn't been sold yet. And so all of a sudden in the 40s you get an importance attached to brand new songs that can be copyrighted. Well, if you're doing that instead of reaching back for old songs and dusting them off one more time, or finding some weird, neat old song that nobody's done before that you still ultimately can't copyright and protect, then you're going to compose new songs. And if as soon as you're composing new songs, you're doing it automatically according to more contemporary standards. And those songs in the 40s, country songs, begin to sound more like pop songs. Instrumentation begins to move up time, because at the same time the amplified steel and takeoff guitars begin to be commonplace, and the standards of the musicianship increases as the profitability of performing for records and radio and occasionally television and the silver screen begins to produce more and more income for fewer and fewer people. Those are the classic signs that the industrialization has gone into second gear. And I think it's a natural enough process. I don't think Microsoft would have ever operated as a folk industry.
Right.
And as long as music is something that can be bought and sold, it's going to operate along the same principles.
What do you think Duffy brought to bluegrass that wasn't advanced other than repertoire? You use.
Oh, I think he brought a whole sensibility to it. He was not He was a superb musician, despite being maybe a little better than average mandolin player. Listen to a lot of those early records, and there are mistakes and things all over the place, and he's constantly overreaching. He brought a sense of how things should sound. I mean, with him in the ensemble, in the singing ensembles, you hear a strong tenor that's even sort of dominating the lead and the other singing voices. He made it permissible for songs to be included or composed that went beyond the sort of conventional hillbilly hymn book harmony and everything. The things that typify Little Cabin Home on the Hill, or so many country standards of those years. Not that he ever abandoned that stuff. He was always bringing old music back at the same time that he was letting new music in, and so by implication, his universe became a lot larger than Bill Monroe's. But I would say that his universe was also a lot larger than Garth Brooks. I would say his universe approached the model that Bob Wills created in the 1930s, where blues and small band swing and hoedowns and waltzes and all of that became not just, we'll borrow a little of this and we'll borrow a little of that, and you hear that. I know all of these music groups that get featured on NPR all sound like, coming up in the next hour we have a Chinese klezmer band that plays a little bit of Irish rock and roll. They love that. We take a little of this and a little of this and a little of that, and somehow, the parts never mesh. It sounds cute. It sounds experimental. I mean, good luck, guys. But Wills didn't do that. It was just part of his universe. Duffy didn't do that because it was part of his universe. I mean, it was a solid structure to begin with, and they were confident enough to let some air in occasionally, and not to keep it an entirely closed universe. But the roots were always solid. They were strong. You knew who they were. You knew that that there were certain things that Duffy was not going to do just for the sake of exploitation, cheap experimentation, or to try to get his name in the newspapers. John didn't do that. Wills didn't really do that, although Wills was much better at self-publicity than John was. But of course, Wills went through millions, and Duffy went through. Duffy was a thousandaire, I think. But that's not why Duffy did it. Duffy did it for the same reason that Ellington did it, and he wanted to be in a place where music was being created and where he had a strong hand in creating that music. Duffy never lost money on those bands, but that was because they were never very cash intensive to begin with. Ellington, I guess, lost a lot of money keeping those bands afloat. But he just, he lived for his music, and he had to keep an orchestra on the payroll to play it.
It seems at some point the lines between what we know and what we love and what's always been bluegrass and what's experimental get breached to a point where people can't tolerate it, and yet the bluegrass community still feels somehow it has to embrace things. And I'm thinking of Tony Trischka, who's been a big rounder act and who Ken loves. Mm-hmm. Now, Tony Trischka, it seems, for the most part, his stuff is always reviewed in Bluegrass Unlimited. So they feel the need to say, we're going to look at what Tony Trischka's doing, even if it has nothing whatsoever anymore to do with bluegrass. And I'm wondering what the push-pull is there, the tension. Well, some of that stuff in the mid-'70s with horns and, was all, it had banjo. I don't know what else it had to do with bluegrass. Why did people even bother kind of keeping him in the fold? Or
Well, that stuff sort of either works or it doesn't. Duffy, I don't think really ever had anything sort of, die of its own weight. Say the way the Newgrass Revival did, which seemed to be just to embrace rock and roll so indiscriminately that it didn't retain much of bluegrass except for the instrumentation.
right.
The kind of thing Bela Fleck has done. I mean, it's okay, but it's going to be just of itself too far over the horizon for most people, and so maybe a couple of generations from now we'll look back and say, God, that was wonderful music. Why wasn't the whole world paying attention?
I'm wondering why they haven't been jettisoned by the bluegrass community to a degree. Is it
They
just
haven't been. They've been ignored.
Okay, they're reviewed, but you think they're ignored basically?
Oh yeah, I mean the reviews just tell you what choices people are making in the magazine, and BU has, I think, to try to protect itself and to save a little bit of space, they've created a new section where things get reviewed a little less intensely and
Right.
more expeditiously, called On the Edge, so that you can put that kind of music out there if you want, and basically put a paragraph and say, here it is, this is what it does. And,
Right.
it ain't. It's if you like it, it's good. If you don't like it, it's bad.
Yeah.
But they're not, really commenting on other things other than the professional standards and things. They're not trying to throw things out or bring things in generically. I mean, it's interesting. Bluegrass is going into a brand new century with, I think, a surprising amount of strength. I think the eclecticism of the last 30, 35 years, the post-Duffy bluegrass, has really strengthened that music and kept it growing, kept it evolving in a way that that couldn't have happened if we hewed exclusively to the Monroe and Stanley model. And I wonder, Baroque music didn't outlive the first half of the 18th century. Classical Romanticism didn't outlive the 19th century by a whole lot.
Right.
Is jazz going to survive the 20th century? How about bluegrass? How about blues? How about western swing? Seems to me all of that music has got a little bit more life left to it than we might have reasonably expected. Bluegrass is more coherent, or do I mean cohesive, more recognizable for what it is, even as it borrows from pop music than the country music examples that you're citing. I mean, is country music going to disappear because it lacks any distinctiveness? I'm not to say people that can keep on creating in that style or analogous styles, but will the need still exist to call it country?
Well,
when it's really sort of tract house suburban.
I think two things will happen, and maybe this is analogous to bluegrass. I think one is that there will be the inevitable counter-reaction back to traditional movement, which won't really take you back. And two, it will morph into a hybrid, and that's happening now in this whole so-called Americana scene, which is a very youth-driven, industry-driven scene with, it's heavy twang bands, and they've got their own magazines now. No Depression, after the Carter song, is devoted to so-called Americana, which is indefinable. Kind of, you know it when you hear it. Older style country sound that's not bluegrass. You should pick up a.
As usual, all this goes on without my knowing of it. Is this like squirrel nut zippers and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's part of it. That's part of it. But there's better bands than that. But sure, it's part of it. Gillian Welch. Do you know her at all? Or have you heard of her? She's.
I've heard the name.
She's a kind of hippie Maybelle Carter clone who's out there attracting young girls who want to dress like her. Have that. She looks like a Grand Wood painting, and then gets up on stage and sings newly composed songs that sound a lot like old songs, and she's very popular on the college circuit and outside of that as well. I'm sure she's played the Birchmere. I'm sure she's been around here quite a bit, but she comes out of LA, I believe. And they gussy up her heritage. Maybe she was born somewhere else, but she grew up in California, I think.
Sarah Carter lived in California for 30 years.
Right.
I mean, are these Americana people attaching themselves to the Folk Alliance?
Interestingly, I talked about this with Phyllis yesterday. They did initially, and now there is an incipient trade group just getting underway called the Americana Music Association. And I talked to Phyllis Barney about that, and she's a little frustrated by it because she said, and I agree with her, that these are people whom the Folk Alliance would like to have under their umbrella, just to get numbers and cash in, of course. And her take on it, and it's an interesting one, she's probably right, is that the Americana Music Association is being put together by people who are a lot more industry-driven than the Folk Alliance saw itself as. Their focus very quickly seems to be on getting Grammy categories, on getting cards in record stores that say Americana, so the music can be places, things of that nature, getting radio charts that are real clear cut.
Marketing hot on the heels of the thing being marketed.
Right, whereas the Folk Alliance, somewhat true to its name, still tries to, it promotes itself very heavily as being an organization that tries to foster homegrown music in whatever form you want to make it. The Folk Alliance sees as part of its mission the desire to help you nurture your local club or festival scene if that's what you want to do. The Americana Music Association, which has not gotten going yet and has never had a conference, looks like it is more geared toward charts and record store bins and things like that. But yeah, a lot of the musicians who would play
get the damn product out there. Let the culture take care of itself.
Yeah, exactly, and so it's an interesting development. She's frustrated by it. She admitted that because she wants all those people.
But she should probably be looking at some of those methods too, because it's unless you're doing stuff like that strictly for your own amazement.
Yeah.
Then those things are an inevitable part of the mixture today.
Right.
You can go around all you want selling cassettes out of your car trunk, but if someone else is looking and saying, look, we'd like to maybe get 3 meals a day out of our livelihood, you can't. You really can't call that an illegitimate impulse.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking before, and I don't want to lose the thought, which is that bluegrass has actually now had a longer life post-folk revival than it had pre-folk revival. So, if it's been around since the mid-40s or so, most of that has been after, folk music was adopted by, educated urbanites who or have one foot in commercial camps and one foot in other camps. And so,
The folk revival rubbed off somewhat on bluegrass, but not a lot of it really stuck. We took in some of the repertoire, but not too many of the performance techniques.
yeah.
I mean, since the 1970s, the high-voiced people have either tried to sound like Duffy or Ralph, and the lady singers, for the most part, sound like Dolly.
Right.
Those were the dominant and compelling influences. Elvis Presley, left nothing to bluegrass outside of Monroe's pleasure at having him record Blue Moon of Kentucky. But I can't think of another Monroe song Presley ever touched, and Presley didn't write songs, so Monroe didn't have the opportunity to do those. And whether he would have or not, remains to be seen. I don't think that the wild banjo stuff, the Trishka and Fleck, New York banjo music has had a lot of impact. Peter Rowan, when he goes off into other spheres, never takes the bluegrass people with him. He has to come back and sing Monroe music again before his people. He can go off and do that all he wants. He's welcome back anytime. I mean, Skaggs did it, and Skaggs got welcomed back. Dolly Parton never did anything else, and Dolly did a bluegrass. There's a kind of a meritocracy there, If you put out a good record, nobody cares what your past has been, We're going to listen to that record.
Yeah, some people care though. When Dolly Parton was just a few months ago, when Dolly Parton was put on the cover of Bluegrass Unlimited, there was some letters saying, "Why are you doing this? You obviously know that."
But those are the same people that called the Rush Limbaugh shows and all.
Okay.
You hear from those people are so strident, and you hear from them so far out of proportion to their numbers that you think they represent something that they really don't. You came to talk about Rounder. I mean, I think one of Rounder's geniuses is that Rounder has always sort of floated serenely above the fray.
Yeah.
It has no particular orthodoxy.
Yeah.
But it is always open to whatever's out there that looks either like it'll be a moneymaker. Although I think for Rounder, that's often come somewhat after the fact by surprise.
Yes.
Because if they see something or hear something that sounds like it's got a place in the scheme of things, they're very open. My archival things, I've had Rounder turn down one project out of all the ones I've ever suggested to them.
What was that?
I wanted to do an entire CD of fiddlers, either playing solo or playing while they were singing, but without bands.
Okay.
Which I think is a glorious sound. Ken Irwin said, "No."
Did he tell you why?
Huh?
Did he tell you?
Well,
why?
he didn't have to. I can simply guess myself that he thought the thing would lose too much money.
Well, the interesting thing is they've released solo fiddle music. So I don't, that's why
But
I
not
asked why.
entire collections, not archival collections.
Yes, that's
I
true.
mean,
They've
it's-
released, yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, they put Bruce Molsky's new record out, which is very nice, and the fiddle stuff he plays on there is, I think, also. Well, maybe it's not. And you know, that's okay, because this guy's a live working performer who's going to be out there flogging the product whenever he's working.
Yeah.
And Bruce is never going to make a mint for them, but he'll pay things back. And when they every once in a while, when they wake up and find that they've got a George Thorogood or Alison Krauss or NRBQ or something on their hands, or did they do NRBQ?
Yeah.
Yeah,
they do.
okay. That makes money out of all proportion to the effort that goes into producing it. They're very happy about plowing that money back into guaranteed losers like I guess my favorite is this Alan Lomax project, which they have committed so much
Yes.
of their resources to, that I wish somebody had control of besides the Lomax family, because I think that that series should have been edited for quality a whole lot more than it has been.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's paying attention to that. Well, yeah, the stuff I submit, nobody does anything to it.
Right.
I mean, if I write notes and then there's a mistake, a grammatical error or something, it'll show up in a printed product.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's so much an indictment of their staff as it is that they have faith in me. If they see the mistake or something, they'll think, oh, that must be there because Spottswood wanted it there. And sometimes I'd like them to be a little more intrusive than they are. But no problem with my concepts or the whole thing of bringing the archival music back anyway. So I mean, it's a wonderful forum for me. Rounder gets more of the stuff I do than anybody else.
Do you deliver finished masters to them?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you just do the record, they put it out.
I do the record and they put it out. I'm a little weak with the artwork because I don't have a huge personal